Greetings, Fire Chargers, Darkblade here, and I just want you to show you the results of my training and also experience orb use. I no longer have any yokai that are limited to level 1. And then there's Rockabilly, the one that I will not choose, that I choose not to grind. By the way, I found how to. What does this mean? I found out how to give my friend that this energy stuff that we use in game. I also want to show you some other stuff. These are some of the things that I got on past incidents where I was playing but not recording. This is Wazat, Gomasan, Dumbcap. I think that's Pain, Fidgefont, Negatibuzz, something about metals, the thing that you saw earlier, and this is the thumbnail for the video that I will be uploading today. I will be recording today. This is Know Your Enemy Japan by U.S. National Archives. Okay, that is not what I was intended. It was uploaded on July 29th, 2016. This is part 2. Part 1 left at about 1647. But I'll go back to 1637 just to have some more context. Now we have a hard limit. From now on, all of my videos are going to be strictly fewer than 40 minutes long.
Only the empire. Japan should take over the management of Asia, then extend it to the rest of the world. If you are Japanese, you believe you have been commanded by heaven to conquer all other races and peoples and put them under a Japanese rule. If you are Japanese, you believe the place of honor among the spirits is reserved for those who die in battle. For they become warrior gods and are enshrined in a sacred temple, Yasukuni Shrine. The names of soldiers killed in battle are written
I
on
think that was a bit reductionist.
tablets and placed at night in the inner recesses of this most holy Yasukuni Shrine. That is the greatest honor that man can achieve in Japan. to die in battle and be enshrined in Yasukuni, where even the emperor comes to bow to him. That's why soldiers, when saying goodbye to each other, often say, "See you in Yasukuni." That's why mothers and wives accept the ashes of their dead soldiers without grief or sorrow. The silent victorious return, it is called. For the dead are warrior gods who live on beside them to be cherished and cared for, to be given food and drink and a lighted cigarette to smoke. That's why Jap soldiers would rather be killed than surrender, or to be killed.
Fun fact, King James I of England was talking about how bad smoking was 300 years before a certain dictator of Germany did.
Means they become warrior gods. To surrender means everlasting shame and dishonor to them and their family and all their ancestors. If you are Japanese, you believe these things implicitly.
What is it with these? What is this screen of?
But if you are not Japanese, what then is the real Japan?
Interesting
The
question.
Japan of the geographer, the anthropologist, and the historian. The Japan of which the Japanese themselves know little or nothing. The name Japan comes from two Chinese words, ji and pen, the literal translation of which is the land where the sun comes from. The Chinese called it that because Japan lay to the east.
That is correct. The English name of the country comes from ultimately comes from a southern mean in reading of those two characters, so it is not descended from the Japanese pronunciation of any era.
Geographers say Japan is a chain of volcanic islands, 1,200 miles long and an average of 120 miles wide. Our total land mass being a little larger than the state of California. Rocky and mountainous, only 16% of Japan is suitable for farming. Every human being in Japan lives within sight of mountains, many of them from 6,000 to 12,000 feet high. There are some 50 active volcanoes scattered through Japan.
I remember hearing somewhere that currently the official definition of a mountain has to be like 8,200 feet high or something. So some of these mountains would not be counted as mountains if that is correct.
Average of 4 times a day, Japan has earthquakes.
Well,
Severe shocks occurring about once every 2.5 years. With one disastrous earthquake. On an average of 4 times a day, Japan has earthquakes. Severe shocks occurring.
Is that like if it's if it's Richter or Mercalli, anything at all, then it counts.
Once every 2.5 years. With one disastrous earthquake about every 25 years.
That would be horrifying. Especially since traditional Japanese architecture does not seem to be well suited to that.
Many of them from 6,000 to 12,000 feet high. There are some 50 active volcanoes scattered through Japan.
That sounds
On an average of 4
terrifying.
times a day, Japan has earthquakes. Severe shocks occurring about once every 2.5 years. With one disastrous earthquake about every 25 years.
If you could see kind of like the structure, there's kind of like some hints as to how the building was structured. By the way, this is not the video I intended on reacting. There was another video that I remember seeing a long time ago from some sort of young earth creationist, and I wanted to react to that, but I couldn't find it. Oh, good. People donating.
There are some 45
Oh.
cities with a population of over 100,000, only 3 of which are beyond the range of 16-inch naval guns. Tokyo, the capital, with a population of 7,900,000, is the third largest city in the world.
Oh.
And what of the people of Japan and their so-called divine origin? Anthropologists say the original inhabitants of the islands were a hairy barbarian people called Ainus. Later on,
That is correct. The original inhabitants are the Jomon people, who are the ancestors of the Ainus. They also left a substrate in ethnic Japanese people, but Ainu people themselves are basically just found here, and they used to also be in some parts of Russia, and now they're in less of some parts of Russia as well.
fierce Mongolian tribes moved in and began conquering the Ainus.
By the way, in the what's it called? First millennium BC, the Yayoi people came in, and basically became the ancestor of Japanese and also, I think, Ryukyuan people. But I'm not sure if anything that this says about Mongolians happened. Japan is famous for resisting Mongolian attempts at conquest.
Still later, other tribes from many sources arrived on the scene.
The Manchu conquered. The Manchu are in northeastern China around Heilongjiang province. That's where they're from. And they did conquer China, but I do not think that any conquest of Japan by the Manchus ever happened. Or Malay people, or other Austronesians for that
The
matter.
fusion of all these tribes and races resulted in the Japanese of today, not of one pure blood, but of a well-mixed plasma cocktail of Ainu, Mongol, Manchu, Malaysian.
I would say that this is one of the worst parts of the entire video so far.
Of the history of Japan, historians say that somewhere around the beginning of the Christian era, they elevated to leadership a chief or high priest, in this case the emperor, who claimed to have an inside track with the gods. This evolved into Shintoism, and the emperor's son myth became the dominant religion. But the early emperors had little political power, for the islands were really divided into many independent and quarrelsome tribes, ruled over by powerful barons or daimyos.
That was the case in the Warring States period, which is not exactly early in Japanese history. Documented Japanese history goes back some centuries before the Warring States period ever started.
Daimyos each had large, well-paid private armies of warriors called samurai. The samurai were the important and privileged class.
Oh yeah, and the beginning of the Warring States period is also nowhere near the beginning of the Christian era.
Real aristocrats who lived off the fat of the land without working. As a badge of rank, they wore 2 swords. A short sword for committing harakiri when captured or disgraced, and a large 2-handed sword they fought with. With this sword, it was their privilege to lop off heads, arms, or ears of the peasants, either for practice or amusement. To further...
Yeah, I'm not sure about what the current state of the evidence is on how common or illegal such a practice was historically.
set themselves apart from the common herd, the samurai developed a code of rules for themselves called Bushido, the code of the warrior. Bushido extolled absolute loyalty to one's superior and reckless bravery in battle. But most important, Bushido not only sanctioned double dealing and treachery, but looked upon it as an art to be cultivated. It encouraged ambush. Jump a man from behind when he's unarmed and you've got a club. When he's alone and you've got a gang. That's Bushido, the art of treachery and the double cross. The national code of Japan. Harakiri was also a privilege of the samurai. When condemned to death, they were allowed to kill themselves rather than be beheaded. The executioner's axe was for the common people. As a result, harakiri became an elaborate ceremony, a form of art that showed bravery and indifference to pain. A man's son or his best friend stood by with a big sword to chop his head off in case he lost his nerve. The daimyos and their paid samurai engaged in unending bloody civil wars against each other for the right to become the shogun.
Something like that did happen.
Being the shogun meant being top dog among all the daimyos, a dictator of dictators, ruling the islands in the name of the emperor, who was kept in the background as a religious figurehead.
In the year 1592, the powerful shogun Hideyoshi thought he and Japan were strong enough to make their first bid to cover the world with a Japanese rule. And as they have ever since, they picked China as the first victim.
Wait. So, apparently they're skipping right to around the end of the Warring States period without explaining how that end happened.
Hideyoshi invaded Korea, but Chinese from other provinces came to the aid of the Koreans. The Japs were stopped, and when Hideyoshi died suddenly, the invasion was called off. But they did a complete job of plunder, taking back with them all the wealth and art they could carry. They also brought back 30,000 pickled ears and noses of Chinese and Koreans killed in battle. These they buried in what is now known as the Ear Mound in the city of Kyoto. It was around this period that something new came into the midst of this warring, bloodthirsty people. Something new and strange. In the year 1521, Magellan had sailed around the world to the Philippines. In his wake came Spanish and Portuguese missionaries who eventually visited the Japanese islands. The strange new thing they brought was Christianity, the revolutionary doctrine of peace on earth and the equality and brotherhood of man.
Based.
Here was something that dignified the lowly Japanese serfs as human beings. Soon there were some 200 churches and over 200,000 converts.
Having that many is a very base thing to do. By the way, does anyone know what the people early from a few seconds earlier in the video were singing?
The warlords became fighting. These foreign medicine men were teaching tolerance, brotherly love, peace, and even equality. So they acted.
Anyway, you see that hole? That is why doors made out of literal paper are probably not a good thing to have. This fire.
137 churches were destroyed in Nagasaki. All Christian converts in Tokyo were burned at the stake.
137. That's like the majority of however many there were in the entire country.
Throw out the West. Throw out its poisonous doctrine of peace. And with that, Japan closed its doors. No one could leave Japan. No one could enter.
Yeah, there was very extreme persecution of Christians in Japan around that period. Was it end of the 16th century, beginning of the 17th?
Foreign sailors shipwrecked on their shores were tortured and beheaded. For 200 years, Japan remained completely isolated. And in those
Well, there was some limited contact with the outside world. For example, the Netherlanders could trade at one specific island, but under very restricted circumstances. By the way, throughout the Edo period, there was a community of Christians that managed to survive underground throughout all this throughout the persecution. However, they ended up theologically and doctrinally compromised in certain places, which is not a good thing to happen.
100 years, the world advanced more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. Voltaire lived, and Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Pasteur. The Americans fought a revolution for the belief that all men were created equal. The French fought...
Remember, for any racists who claim to be American, all men are created equal is literally the founding doctrine of the United States. It's the idea that this country it's an idea that is at the literal foundation of our country. It is part of the reason why this country even exists. It's been right into the Declaration of Independence.
For liberty, equality, and fraternity. The power of steam was discovered.
I think that's now the motto of France itself.
And the steamboat and steam engine began to narrow the oceans and continents. The telegraph was invented. China was opened up to the trade of the world.
Wait. Let me look something up. When was the telegraph invented?
Here's an answer from encyclopedia.com.
Oh yeah, 1837. So still well before Japan reopened.
But during all this time, began to narrow the oceans and continents. The telegraph was invented. China was opened up to the trade of the world.
Though not through its own free will.
This time, Japan was closed. No news reached her shores. She remained a nation blacked out from the rest of the world, still living in the Middle Ages. Then, in 18...
Technically, the Middle Ages were already over by the time that Japan shut itself off from the rest of the world.
In 1953, just 92 years ago, Commodore Perry's American fleet of 4 ships...
So, when was this video made? 1940.
sailed into Yokohama, bearing a message from President Fillmore offering the hand of friendship and the interest of trade.
And also, some of those boats that he arrived with, were quite intimidating.
Japanese warlords woke with a shock from their 200 years of self-imposed isolation. They realized that the hairy white barbarian had machines and weapons that made him powerful. If the sons of heaven were to rule the earth, their spears and swords would be of little avail. Also, they realized how weak and divided they really were compared to Western nations. Hastily, the feuding barons stopped fighting among themselves and joined together. But they needed a...
Wait, what fighting were they doing at this point? The Warring States period had already been over for the past 250 years.
Figure around whom they could rally. Available was the God Emperor, who up to now had been more or less of a stooge. So, in 1868, the warlords did away with the position of shogun and elevated Emperor Meiji to supreme dictatorship over all Japan, reserving for themselves and themselves alone the right to speak for him and to guide his policies, a position the warlords have hung on to ever since. Now for a strong military.
I can record for less than another 15 minutes.
The paid warriors, the samurai, were too few for a national army, so they introduced a warlords have hung on to ever since. Now for a strong military. The paid warriors, the samurai, were too few for a national army, so they introduced another revolutionary idea into Japanese life.
Is it
The
drafting?
sons of peasants were suddenly permitted the great privilege of bearing arms, and it was a great privilege, for being a soldier almost meant being a noble.
And there's also some conscription into this very soon after the revolution. Japan starts conquering stuff.
And to sell this program to the Jap masses, the warlords shrewdly used religion. They revised ancient Shintoism to suit their purpose and forced emperor worship, military glorification, and fanatic thoughts of conquest to be preached by all Shinto priests. Thus, Japan rid herself of the old samurai, but their fanatical spirit was passed on to the new peasant soldier, Bushido code and all. The warlords now flung open their doors to the West. Posts and telegraphs were introduced, railroads, the European calendar, photography. The warlords now flung open their doors to the West. Posts and telegraphs were introduced.
The country was... Japan was opened up like over a decade before the Meiji Restoration.
Railroads, the European calendar.
Wait, why does this thing begin on Tuesday? Also, what day of the week was October 1st, 1856?
It was Wednesday, October 1st, 1856.
So, yeah, the accuracy of this calendar is apparently suspect.
Photography, European dress.
Yeah, let me look that up again and somewhere else. I want to be sure. Go to time and yeah, I have it confirmed as a Wednesday, and I can record for less than 12 more minutes.
Frenzy of modernization seized upon the land. With a politeness such as the world has seldom seen, the Japanese invited other nations to help them build up their military power. And always with the thought, treat with the foreigner, learn his weapons, and then use them to destroy him. The old Bushido double cross. The English, having the best navy in the world, were invited to build up and train the Japanese navy. The French, supposed to have the best army in the world, were invited to train the Japanese army.
I heard this from the channel History Matters. Apparently there was a close relationship between the UK and Japan up until after World War I.
But when they saw the French defeated by the Germans in the Franco-Prussian War, the Japanese switched to German advisors for their army. From the English and the Americans, they borrowed the outward forms of democracy, ministers and their representative body, the Diet. But this was all a cruel joke, for the Army and Navy cabinet ministers, still actually descendants of the old feudal barons, are above and beyond any lawmaking body. They have direct access to the emperor and can entirely bypass the civil government. In fact, whatever Japan took from the West or the Chinese, the warlords never took the moral or ethical principles that went with them. All modern knowledge that has come to the Japanese people, all culture, all ideas, all thinking has been filtered through to the people from the top down. Any new idea is first tried out by the ruling classes, changed to suit their purpose, then with the emperor's blessing handed down to the people as divine law.
I don't know how accurate that
In
is.
our Western civilization, practically all the ideas, the forces that have changed our thinking have come from the bottom up. Evolution or revolution starts with the people. With the Japs, evolution is handed down to the people. Japan was westernized by decree, not by popular desire. In spite of westernization, everyone in Japan still rules over his inferior and in turn bows down to his superiors just as they did in the Middle Ages. Women have the least standing of all. They must obey the males in all things. Even today, there isn't any moral right or wrong in Japan. Merely, are you or are you not obedient to your superiors?
I don't know how
For
accurate that
instance,
is.
today,
What's that?
a father still has the power to sell his daughter when she is 11 or 12 to a factory or a mill. She will eat, sleep, and go to school in the factory, but all her earnings will go to her father. Or, if she is a little older and he needs money, the father can sell her outright to a geisha house or house of prostitution. And modernization has done
Yeah,
even
that's
less for the standard
terrifying.
of living. Individual welfare still doesn't count. Discomfort is supposed to be a divine virtue. And that's why the people of Japan all work as long as they can, and as soon as they can, and as hard as they can.
How much did the people and their human rights advance in the immediate aftermath of the Industrial Revolution really anywhere in the world?
For they, too, consider themselves as soldiers with a divine mission. These women beat the earth in humble rhythm just as they did 1,000 years ago.
What is the purpose of this?
These women work day after day, month after month in the rice fields. Human machines producing rice and soldiers. Over their heads fly the latest planes to the wars. A diesel train thunders past. But these farmers work and live and eat like they did in the 17th century.
What's that thing that person was holding? This thing.
The income for the whole family, as high as $150 a year, and as low as $16 a year. The
$150 a year, that's less than 50 cents per day.
peasant works harder, eats less, and pays more taxes than any other peasant on earth. But he seldom complains, for he is carrying out the divine will of the emperor.
I don't know what data there is on that.
The white-collar Japanese in the daytime uses telephones and adding machines. But when he goes home, he puts on a kimono and lives as his ancestors did in the Middle Ages.
What is it with this video in the
Japanese
Middle
houses
Ages?
have no foundations. There are no walls as we know them. No windows, no paint, no varnish, no curtains, no chairs, and no beds. To sleep, they spread a couple of quilts on the floor with no sheets and lay their heads on hard, round pillows. Their food lacks albumin, fats, and sugar. The standard of living is the same as
Let me see. Albumin, that's like the white part of an egg.
it was hundreds of years ago, one of the lowest on earth. For Japan eats and lay their heads on hard, round pillows. Their food lacks albumin, fats, and sugar. The standard of living is the same as it was hundreds of years ago, one of the lowest on earth. For Japan became industrialized not to raise the standard of living, but to prepare for conquest. This man in the factory doesn't work a 6-day, 48-hour week for good wages. He works a 72-hour week at starvation wages and frequently dies of tuberculosis at the age of 40.
That sounds horrifying, but 72 hours is still the minority of how many there are in a full week.
Millions accept their fate in dumb, regimented silence. Why don't they rebel, revolt, organize labor unions? Well, first of all, having dedicated their lives to the Emperor, belief in Japan's divine mission to conquer runs through the whole people. This makes practically all of them willing prisoners of a vicious, ironclad social structure. Having dedicated their lives to the Emperor, belief in Japan's divine mission to conquer runs through the
I
whole
wanted
people.
to note
This makes
something.
practically all of them willing prisoners of a vicious,
I've seen something that looks like this in a picture of Mao Zedong. What is it?
ironclad social structure. A system of regimentation so perfect, it made Hitler's mouth water. On top of the heap of this social structure are leaders of the Army and Navy, the warlords who surround the Emperor. They are Japan's first team. Nearly equal in power are the half-dozen super-rich industrial aristocratic families who own the wealth. They're the second team. And they play ball with the military rulers because the warlords give them cheap, uncomplaining labor and lush profits. And they, in turn, provide the money for the war machines. Next in line are the professional politicians, who are appointed by the government as rulers over the 47 provinces. These political stooges slavishly...
So apparently the number of prefectures is the same as it now as it was in 1945.
follow orders because their jobs and their very lives depend on the whims of the Army and Navy leaders. At the bottom of the heap are the peasants and workers, the Heutlei, the masses. To make sure the masses stay in their place, there are the police, the gendarmes, the Japanese Gestapo, and the billions of ghosts of dead Japanese ancestors who watch over every act of the living. And just in case some Japanese don't believe in ghosts, they have an efficient, unique Japanese invention, the thought police. Yes, thought police, whose business it is to arrest you if you think dangerous thoughts. Who decides when your thinking is dangerous? That's easy. The thought police decides. About 10,000 people a year are arrested for thinking bad, selfish, dangerous thoughts.
I don't know what date it was on this. So, having... I forgot what I was going to say about, and I don't know if it was any good.
To keep the aristocrats and government officials from straying from the straight and narrow Japanese line, there is another strictly Japanese invention. Secret organizations like the dreaded Black Dragon Society.
That's a real
This
thing.
secret gangster organization, made up of thousands of fanatics, was headed by one of the world's most sinister characters, Mitsuru Toyama, chief of Japan's Murder Incorporated, sometimes called the unofficial emperor. 90 years old when he died in 1944, this dreaded master murderer held the threat of death over everyone in Japan who dared oppose the warlords too strongly. 1930. Premier Hamaguchi shot down in his desk. 1932. Prime Minister Inukai. Finance Minister Inouye. Baron Takuma Dan, head of the House of Mitsui. 1936. 4 political leaders killed. The Prime Minister escapes. Brother-in-law shot by mistake. But the main reason the warlords have been able to maintain their vicious grip on Japan lies in the educational system. Education is compulsory in Japan. 97% of the Japs are literate. But the Japanese school...
That is a good number.
...school is not an institution for the development of the mind. It is a government-controlled institution designed to teach only officially selected facts and officially approved ideas. The object is to mass-produce students who all think alike. To teach in the shortest possible time only the knowledge and skills necessary to make the student an obedient, loyal subject of the divine emperor. The children are taught only how to do things. Their minds absorb the official lessons like a sponge absorbs water.
Okay, that is where I will end this video because it is approaching my limit. Goodbye, Fire Chargers. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow or later today, depending on how long this video takes to post. Darkblade out.